The difference between having a great quarter, making your number, or reporting a bad quarter often comes down to the effectiveness of your sales team's discovery calls and demos. But how do you make sure your reps are doing the right things on their calls in order to finish the quarter strong? Well, introducing Gong.io, the #1 conversation intelligence platform for B2B sales teams. Gong helps you ensure your reps are doing deep discovery calls and crisp sales demos by recording, transcribing, and analyzing their calls. And Gong allows you to understand how well your playbook is being followed and analyze how well it's working so you can constantly move the needle on your win rates. Now, if you request a demo of Gong as a result of hearing this message, you'll get a free ebook copy of my award-winning book, Zero Time Selling, 10 Essential Steps to Accelerate Every Company's Sales. So go to gong.io/accelerate to request your no-obligation demo and get your copy of my award-winning book, Zero Time Selling. Again, that's gong.io/accelerate, gong.io/accelerate. So go there now and come back and enjoy today's episode. This episode of Accelerate is brought to you in part by Discover.org. Looking to close 4 times as many deals in half the time? Discover.org's industry-leading, human-verified sales intelligence gives you all of the data and insights like direct dials, org charts, planned projects, verified emails, and executive moves you need to stop wasting time on research and spend more time talking to the right decision-maker with the right message at the right time. Their team of 250-plus sales researchers do all the work so that you don't have to. 2,500 companies are already using Discover.org to win more deals. So check them out at www.discoverorg.com. That's www.discoverorg.com. It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 579 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. I want to give a big aloha to my guest today. That's Tiffani Bova. Tiffani is the Global Customer Growth and Innovation Evangelist for Salesforce.com. And somehow, somebody convinced her to actually leave Oahu, where she is living, and relocate to the mainland. And I have to tell you, if I was in her shoes, that would have been a tough sell for me. Because, gosh, I love Hawaii. Anyway, on today's conversation, we're going to dive into the topic of buying. And we're going to talk about why selling has always been more about the buyer than the seller. And this is going to be a great companion to the conversation I had in my last episode with Jay Baer about the customer experience and the impact of that on the purchase decision. So we're also going to explore today why the funnel is no longer an applicable metaphor for the buying process, and talk about the 4 parallel streams that buyers actually work through to arrive at a purchase decision. Now, if you'd like to see the show notes for this episode, go to andypaul.com/579. Now, in the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about a new report that we just produced. It's based on the input of over 300 leading entrepreneurs, sales thought leaders, experienced executives, people I've interviewed right here on Accelerate. And this report is all about what you can do to amp up and accelerate your sales right now. I mean, you might be surprised what the experts recommend be the first thing you should do to get your sales back on track. Now, this report is free, so you want to go to accelerate.fm/accelerate to get your copy right now. That's accelerate.fm/accelerate to get your copy now. Now, before we get to Tiffani, let me remind you that today's show is brought to you in part by our friends at Gong.io. Gong analyzes your sales calls and demos so you can understand what's working and what's not. It's a great coaching tool to help managers boost rep productivity. So check it out at gong.io/accelerate. If you do that today, you also receive a free PDF copy of my award-winning best-selling book, Zero Time Selling. And in case you missed at the beginning of the show, this episode is also brought to you by our great partner, Discover.org. The Discover.org platform is a game changer for sales, marketing, and staffing professionals. The feature-rich sales intelligence platform is supported by 250-plus researchers who continually update the contact data and provide account-specific insights to help sales and marketing teams break ahead of the pack. So see the product live at discoverorg.com/schedule-demo. That's discoverorg.com/schedule-demo. You know, this week we're celebrating the 2nd anniversary of Accelerate. I mean, hundreds of great conversations. I mean, 2 years ago today, my guest was the incredible Dan Waldschmidt. As in episode 2, we talked about how to achieve outrageous success in life and business. So we'd like to know what's been your favorite episode, who's been your favorite guest. If If you need to review the episodes, the list of episodes, we have a complete list on my website at andypaul.com. Upper nav bar, under podcast, you'll see a listing for a complete episode list. Click on that. And then leave us a message. Let us know which one you really liked. And maybe there's a guest you want us to have back on the show again. So 2 ways you can send us that message. One is go to andypaul.com. In the lower right-hand corner of the homepage is a red button that says Ask a Question. But in this case, you're going to send us a message. In this case, an audio message. So click on that. Leave an audio message. Who's been your favorite guest, your favorite episode, maybe who you'd like to see. Everybody that sends us a message will send you a signed copy of my best-selling book, Amp Up Your Sales. Just need to remember to leave us your mailing address. All right. So finally, before we get to interview, I remind you that we also want to hear your questions about sales and sales management, the challenges that you're facing on a daily basis, and how maybe we can help you with that. So each week, if you submit a question, I'll choose one from those submitted the previous week, and we'll answer that with my co-host, Bridget Gleason, on the Friday episode, Frontline Fridays. The winner, the person who submitted the question we answer, will win a free half-hour coaching call with me. That's more than a $250 value. So don't delay. You want to send those today. So 2 ways to send your questions. 3 ways. You can connect with me on LinkedIn and send it to me via LinkedIn, as one person has done. Otherwise, you can send it to me at andy@andypaul.com. Or again, go to the homepage of andypaul.com, red button on the lower right-hand corner. It says Ask a Question. Click on that. Leave us your question via an audio message. And if it's the winning question, with your permission, we're going to play that on the air. All right. Give us your questions. I think we took care of all the business we need to take care of, so let's jump into it now with Tiffani Bova. Tiffani, welcome to Accelerate.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Or I should say aloha, maybe.
Yes, always aloha. It's always better.
Always better, yeah. Aloha and mahalo. So, as a Hawaii native. So, standard question I open the show with for all my guests is, in your opinion, what's the single biggest challenge facing sales reps today?
So I'll answer that professionally and then personally, because I think it's 2 different answers. Yeah.
Sure.
I think the challenge is now that the customers are far more in control. And I know that it's probably a topic that's been overexposed.
Yes.
But, yep. I mean, whether it's, Gartner research or CEB research or the challenger sale, or just pick one, right? Mm-hmm. I'd say that the customers are more prepared. And so the challenge is, as salespeople, I think we as a group have a little bit of fatigue on all the change and hype that's come at us over the last couple of decades. It all depends how long you've been selling. If you've been doing this for 5 years or 10 years or 15 or 20, like I have, you're definitely into the fatigue mode. But I'd say that that pace of acceleration is not slowing. And so it forces you in a profession to always be honing your skills. And that means personal skills, but also your skills with technology. So I think that's a big challenge to kind of keep pace with the customers. Yeah.
Before you move on to the personal side, though, it seems to me that part of the fatigue, though, that comes is that it's the people who aren't continuously honing their skills and aren't learning. They're just sort of watching it happen to them. And to me, those are the ones that suffer the most fatigue, or oftentimes guests on the show talk about overwhelm, right? Is that, if you're engaged, it's not like this thing is happening independent of you. I mean, you're supposedly engaged, right? As a salesperson, you're engaged in what's happening with your customers. It's not like it's evolving 180 degrees overnight. When you have to be engaged, as you talked about, in this learning and this adaptation of new technology and so on, so that you don't feel so overwhelmed.
Yeah, and so that would be the personal side. My personal answer would have been you constantly, but it's a great segue, right? Is that you constantly have to be a student of your profession. And the profession of selling is yes, the act of, getting a customer to buy whatever it is you are selling. But there's also lots of other things that are included in that, storytelling, tenacity, follow through, being prepared, like all of those things. So being a student of your profession may mean, look, I want to really hone in on a particular vertical. So I'm going to go and, listen to podcasts, or I'm going to read the industry magazine, or join an association, or take a class, or do something, right? Or go to a trade show that gets me embedded and understands the language of a particular vertical or industry. So it could be learning in that way. It could be the social selling tools that are coming at us, 100 a day. Mm-hmm. So what are the things, which one works for me and for my habits and my personality. It could be learning to present better. Someone asked me the other day, what would you recommend? Because I speak a lot, and how did you get better? And I said, this guy happened to be an introvert, super introvert, and I said, maybe go take like a drama class, right,
Mm-hmm.
or an improv class.
Absolutely,
yeah,
improv.
and just get out of your comfort zone. So when I say on the personal side, challenging is you constantly have to be challenging yourself to learn, and I think. Even if you're a high performer, like even if you consistently hit quota and you always do well and, everybody wants you to work for them and on their team and all those things, that's all great and impressive. But that doesn't mean next quarter it's going to be the same, right? I think the biggest competition now is for sellers is a more educated and intelligent seller, and not from the brain, but from the tools. And so you have to keep up with a different pace of seller now. So I think those two questions complement each other. The question you asked, the two sides of it, both professionally and personally, right? Always being a learner, and then making sure that you don't just ignore things because of fatigue that will put you at a disadvantage in the future.
Well, and so as we consider the future a little bit, where there's certainly a picture painted of the impact of AI and machine learning and AI-driven bots and so on the whole business-to-business sales front. And I think it was Forrester or somebody, their sort of apocalyptic forecast that 20% of B2B sales jobs will be gone within 3 years. What do you see sort of coming, and what that means in terms of these behaviors that you just talked about? Do people have to double down? Do they have to become better in one specific area versus another in order to maintain their relevance?
Yeah, I didn't agree with the stat that you just. Yeah, I didn't agree with. Well, I didn't agree with it for a couple of reasons, right? Remember where I used to work.
Sure. The competitor,
so
right?
Having a little fun with that. But I would say, today it is so much more. Going back to this previous question that you just asked, is using technology, whether it's bots, machine learning, analytics, intelligence, big data, et cetera, to augment the human relationship side of selling is where I think there is huge opportunity for improvement. I think salespeople who ignore or, sort of push aside the fact that I'm never going to be replaced or that's ridiculous. It isn't about the rise of the machines and the replacement of the human. It's about empowering people to do things differently, to work smarter and more effectively in a time compressed window where customers, prospects are making decisions so much more quickly and are so much further down that buyer journey, right? So you have to marry the two with, I think it will always augment. And so I do think the greatest competition for any seller is if you are a seller who doesn't use analytics and intelligence and bots and all the things that are now at your disposal, and you're competing against someone who does, even if you have a superior product, you risk being outsold because of it.
And I think there are those some layers of sales though that are a little more threatened than others. I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I don't think that I think you can sort of make it happen to yourself if you just sort of get complacent. But it seems like look at the way we sort of structure SaaS sales these days. It seems like, and we're already seeing some of this, right? That maybe at the SDR level, that there are technologies that come in that could substantially supplant what they're doing.
Yeah, and so that's a great example. So even account-based marketing and sales development reps, when you think about, when I used to do it, and I'd say, look, I'm looking for 100 new deals, and so top of my funnel is at 6,000 people, and I just start dialing for dollars. We've all done it.
Right.
Or do I say, is it really 6,000? I got 6,000 names. I put in some, an algorithm or some if this, then that, and I get the list down to 2,000. And then I say, okay, I'm going to do one more cleanse of that so that I get down to a manageable number so that when looking for 200, 250 customers, I'm actually calling the best opportunities instead of calling all 6,000. And so as an SDR rep or an account-based marketing rep, I am doing, once again, going back to the best use of my time and using intelligence in that way. I think that has huge opportunity for I think sales development reps can become much more effective. I think account-based marketing can be much more targeted. I think if you're, once again, not using those tools, then you're at the 6,000 names and you're just trying to drive through the funnel.
Well, I mean, but my question was, and your example is a good one to sort of pursue is, yeah, if you're trying to parse 6,000 down into, let's say, the 200, 250 names, is if you have specific specs, I mean, you could have an algorithm. Basically, the machine could do that for you in a heartbeat.
Yep.
So,
I'm actually saying that. Okay. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I'm saying, but then where's the value for the SDR at that point? Still making the phone call? Because already there are people talking about, yeah, I've got bots. Like if all we're doing is setting up an appointment for a demo or something, I've got a bot that can do that.
Yeah, it goes back to that personal side of it. Machines not replacing the relationship, right? So I think replacing and I'm not by any stretch saying that what an SDR rep does or someone in account-based marketing is it's mundane in its function. It's very important. But the task is something that can be automated. But the relationship, I don't believe is.
Well, I agree.
So, yeah. So if you take it from 6,000 to 250, then the SDR rep is just always working the best 250. And now they can do really unique things around, video selling or, doing things that are much more compelling door openers with, once again, going back to that, I'm really prepared. So I think that the culling of those names, I don't know about you, but when I used to have to call down 4,000 names, I would much rather have preferred a machine doing it for me.
Absolutely.
Than doing it myself, right? And then just getting to that 250. Yeah.
I was going to say, then you can really personalize it, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
the sort of the fiction of a lot of goes on at the SDR level is we're doing this quote unquote mass personalization, which is a fiction we all sort of adhere to. But if you can really get it down to 250 names, then you can actually then start working on building that relationship. And I don't know if you've read Jeff Colvin's book, Humans Are Underrated, but he talks about, in this age of automation that, the skills that are going to be most emphasized and valued by employers are becoming more human, right? is having more empathy, being able to build relationships, collaborate, co-create with customers. Those are the things that if you can really develop, become more valuable.
Right. And there's no way you can do it at a scale of 5,000 or 6,000, but you can find a way to do it at 250.
Absolutely.
And that also makes the assumption that we're talking about the relationship between human and human.
Yes.
But we also have this automation happening of machine selling to machine. If I work on a manufacturing floor and I need 1,000 more widgets and the machine knows that I have an order for 5,000 and I only have 4,000 widgets on hand, that the machine automatically orders out an additional 2,000 or 3,000 widgets, and that may have quote unquote replaced a salesperson. Let's just play that out. Right.
And probably has to a certain degree.
And probably
already
has, right?
Yeah, if not years ago.
But that doesn't, yes, absolutely. But that doesn't then mean that that salesperson now isn't now in there talking about, how can we do just-in-time manufacturing and maybe more services? And so they're not worried about the widget and they're not driving in a car and they're not, doing all these additional expenses that now it's far more accurate. They can do pipeline, they can do predictive analytics around, what do they think they're going to close because the machine starts to learn, the business ebbs and flows, and now you can be much more focused on, as a seller, the success of your customer in whatever it is they're building with that widget, right? So now I can refocus onto customer success versus worrying about the widget. And so what always cracks me up is I say, I'd love to listen in on the pipeline call between the thing and the thing when they're talking about what orders are in the pipeline, right? And hey, man, this one has slipped. Like, I want to hear that call, between the machine and the machine. So, you can have some fun on it. But then how do you wrap around experience when things are selling to things, right? Because now you have this supply chain, and I use that in quotes.
Right.
I don't mean the traditional supply, but the selling process, if you will, may bounce between human, machine, 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 human, 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 machine, right? I mean, you may be bouncing between those two, whether it's analytics and then something pushes to a sales rep and then they follow up the human, then they enter it into the CRM system, or it happens automatically. And then the machine does something else and then it drops something back into their calendar, and so it's this back and forth between automation, machine learning, and intelligence and the human side, where the customer only maybe sees the human side, which is great. But if you have a long tail of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of customers, we know that it becomes far more automated, and automating or scaling personalization in automation is really tough.
Yeah, no, I love talking about this stuff because it's, whatever we predict is probably going to be wrong, but to some degree. But but there is this change coming, as we've talked about, and it's I don't know. I was just talking to somebody who has just written a book that's basically, the premises is that salespeople are just being complacent and passive overall. His overall impression, and it's like, well, if that's really the case, then, which I don't necessarily agree with at all, but you see sort of a doom and gloom scenario coming, because it's like, okay, if you're really passive, then you're not investing in the things that you spoke about early on, but they need to invest both personally and professionally in order to maintain relevance.
Yeah, and I think it's like this in every profession. I find it fascinating still, and throughout my career, I've gone from, I call myself a recovering seller, which some people take offense to that statement, but which is always funny, because I'm like, it's because I still feel like I bleed sales blood, even though I don't carry a quota. And really doing podcasts like this and the work that I do is about fighting the fight, the good fight, right? For salespeople, et cetera. So I feel like I vicariously get to sell through this wonderful community known as salespeople. But, I would say this is that we just haven't been able to cross the chasm of getting sales to not be sort of like the other four-letter word. We've got MBAs on marketing, and you've got, but we don't yet have it pretty widespread on sales. It's kind of just, it's an electoral, or it's part of the MBA class, or it's part of the, MBA marketing class. And so you've got professors, as you and I know a number of them in common at USC, Steve Martin or Frank at Harvard, there's a number, but it's not very prevalent. And so, the other day there was a Twitter handle that said, 3 words to disappoint your mother, or something like that. The hashtag was 3 words that disappoint your mother. So I tweeted out, I want to be a salesperson. I'm going into sales, right? And so it's sort of this, profession that has this underbelly tone to it. And I think people don't take it seriously, because I think everywhere in life we sell in some way. But those that, make their living and, build their families and their homes and their retirement and everything around the craft and profession of selling, you have to take it seriously like any other profession, not, I'm doing this, for a little bit, I'm working at this retailer, or I'm selling cars, or whatever, just sort of part-time as I do something else, versus a career salesperson. Is like any other career. You just have to. We have to, as an industry, right, find a way to position it as something of value, and not as we have to have it.
Well, and so here's an interesting question. I think it's an interesting question for you. Is this perception of sales, in my experience, and mine is longer than yours, is that, yeah, we have this perception from the outside of salespeople not always being a positive perception. But I've worked in lots of companies where it really started at the top and had the same perception, right? That sales was this necessary, quote unquote, evil. And so I think when we talk about changing the culture, it works in both directions. It has to start within a corporation as well as external with the customer.
Yeah, and what I think, there's a couple of things. I think that, and I totally agree with that comment. You can have engineering-driven companies. I sort of have lived my sales career around technology, so I'll use that. Yeah. So, you have engineering-driven companies where and I'm overgeneralizing. The technology, the product can sell itself. We just have salespeople out there taking orders, which we know that hasn't yet been the case for a long time. But let's just play that out. Okay. Right. Then you'll have some that are very operationally efficient led, right? They're just driving cost out so that they can increase profit, and they're selling, et cetera. And then you have some that are very, customer, now much more than ever, right? Customer centric, customer experience, customer success driven. And then there's some that are very sales driven. You're right, it has to start at the top. And I would say that over the last probably decade, especially in technology sales, the gap between the marketing and sales organization, I fear, has gotten larger. And so that animosity sort of pointing back and forth. And some people listening may say, oh, that doesn't happen at my company. And it may not happen at the executive level. But when you're talking about an individual quota-carrying rep who goes, marketing doesn't add any value, and marketing goes, sales never follows up on my leads. I mean, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff. This is where it has to now, with that customer, going back to this commentary that's been going on for a long time around the customer's more in charge, et cetera, is it for the sake of the customer, marketing, sales, and now customer service has to be so tightly connected, because if they're not, the implication is the fact that the customer has a really horrible experience with the brand. And executives start to notice that in a number of ways. Sales is declining, churn is increasing, CSAT is declining, net promoter score is declining, et cetera. And then they turn, and it's so funny when people go, oh, well, I think, marketing owns customer experience. And someone will say, well, I think customer service owns customer experience. And then, the customer experience officer or chief customer officer says, I own customer experience. And I always say, listen, the customer, when they have something that is really good to share or they need something, they don't pick up the phone and go, hey, I want to talk to the chief marketing officer or the product marketing guy or the CFO, or that's not who they say. They say, I want to talk to my sales guy. And when there's a problem, same thing.
Yep.
They'll say, I got to call my sales guy. So the salesperson is at the front line of, I want to tell you something really good, and I also want to tell you something really bad. So if you don't, as an organization, understand that the connection point between the brand and the customer, more often than not, is a person who carries whatever title, but the role of selling. Right? And so now that's why I said customer service, even more so, upsell, cross-sell, churn, saving a churn or an account save. We even have some stats out there that are saying 25% of quotes leaving CRM systems are now going to be generated by customer service agents.
Oh, customer success, I would expect. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there was a stat I heard about the SaaS business in the Valley that already today, more than 50% of the revenue is generated through customer success. Yeah,
and that's a sort of a new term, right? So customer success means what? I was on a panel a number of months back, and I had fun with a friend of mine, and we were talking about what's the difference between customer experience, customer success, customer service, sales, right, et cetera. And I'm of the mindset that customer experience is what a customer feels. So we want them to feel good about our brand and how they experience it online, offline, with the product, et cetera. And that's hard to quantify, in a metric, if you will. Customer success may be, hey, listen, we happen to sell e-commerce software, and we can see that customers who have deployed our software are selling millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars through our stuff, right? We are helping them be successful in their business. And so the metric may be, are they growing? If they're growing and they're using our technology or our products or whatever it might be, then we're helping them grow, then they are having success with us. And so someone who's responsible for making sure the customer is successful using whatever it is you're selling, I think that that's success. Also, tough to measure. Customer support, right? Maybe it's still kind of, there's a problem, and so someone calls. And I agree with not always making it associated with problem, which customer service may be.
Right.
So I like it if it is really a true cultural mindset shift. But if it's just, hey, it's the new word of the week, and I'm going to spin it up, so that now my customer service agents are now customer success agents, and nothing has changed from the behavior or the tool or the metric or anything, then I'm not a fan.
No. Well, I think it's interesting. You brought this up in an article that you'd written that I was just reading recently, is that, one of the real problems with customers and with sales organizations is it's a problem for the customer if they feel that every different person they speak to at your company sounds like they're coming from a different company, as opposed to having alignment around how they deal with the customer. And,
well, that's what I was saying, that connection between those three, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just sort of reiterating that because it's oftentimes people don't consider that at all. And it doesn't really matter how large or small a company or enterprise you are, they're selling to a customer. Yeah, they need to, if they feel like it's a distinct experience dealing with sales versus customer success or customer service versus whomever else the customer facing person they deal with, that leads to churn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's three things. I think the silos between the teams, I'm just going to focus on customer-facing teams at the moment, sort of, customer service, marketing, sales. The silos between those teams, in my opinion, it is driven by the metrics not aligning. Oversimplifying. Marketing, how many leads? Good, bad, doesn't matter how many leads. Once again, oversimplifying. Sales, did you sell it? Did you not sell it? Did you hit your quota? Did you not hit your quota? Once again, oversimplifying. And then service, how fast did you resolve an issue from the customer? Get off the phone in 2 minutes. And if you think about those just at face value, they're running those teams, individual contributors, in three very different directions. And so until, once again, at the executive level, there may be alignment. At the individual contributor level, that gap gets big when the metrics don't align themselves. So if you say, well, the executives are measured at overall company churn, overall company revenue, and overall company net promoter score. I'm just saying that, right? How do you translate that to an individual contributor? Maybe that you have to get a shared common metric across those three. Maybe it is churn. Maybe it is CSAT scores. Maybe it is lifetime value. Maybe it is, average sale, and then, the recency of a repurchase. Whatever the metric is where you can get those three groups aligned, marching in the same direction, the customer is the one who benefits from it.
Yeah, and so obviously I think that's one of the things that's attractive to companies about account-based sales, account-based marketing is it provides a pretext, if you will, for alignment.
Yeah, and this goes back to your comment earlier. It has to start at the top. And so if it isn't about aligning the execs, right, it's about really thinking about that we just did some recent research at Salesforce on sort of high-performing sales teams, high-performing marketers, and high-performing, customer service. We have 3 separate reports. And if you look at the top 3 things, and everyone says collaboration is key, but then the metrics are misaligned. And so when you see high performers and you double click underneath that, you definitely see it's because they have collaboration, aligned metrics. The teams are, often collaborating on a deal. There's very smooth handoffs. There's sort of natural behaviors. But if the executives try to create a much more, there's kind of no other way to say this, right, competitive environment between the 3 groups,
right?
It backfires, right? I get competition, and I think competition is good, and I think there are certain personalities that are driven by competition, but there are other personalities that are not driven by competition, right? They're driven by the relationship and collaboration, and then so not everyone is motivated by the competition. Even people in sales, not everybody is motivated by the competition.
Well, and it's sort of strange credulity to say, well, on what basis are marketing and sales competing anyway? Right? I mean,
well, you could argue. Well, you could argue that today, right? Because marketers say we own the buyer journey, and if you read the CEB stats or others, right, they're 68% through the buyer journey. So you could argue marketing is doing 68% of the heavy lifting of quote unquote selling. So what do we really need salespeople for? Because then at the end of that 68%, all they're doing is taking an order.
Right. And
being the devil's advocate here.
Right. And then you have serious decisions that's, looks at it completely differently. So in terms of how far you're into that buyer's journey. So, I mean, that said, everybody's got their stats, but I look at the example you brought up as sort of a turf war, not a real competition, right? I mean, I look at competition as, we're going head to head to achieve something, and I'm either going to achieve it or you're going to achieve it. And I see the turf war, but I don't see the competition, right? So it's like, I understand this. See, I've worked for CEOs that thought, hey, this creative tension between sales and marketing is something we want to cultivate because it creates better outcomes when it never does.
Yeah, and I think to your point, and I agree with you, I would say it's slightly different as the sort of the control, right, and ownership.
Yeah, we're fighting for the steering wheel.
Yep, we're fighting for the steering wheel, yet we're all in this car.
And we're running down the road 60 miles an hour. We're fighting over the steering wheel. Yes.
So if I'm like looking that there's a truck on the right and I let the driver know, hey, there's a truck on the right, or hey, I'm on my app and I see there's traffic up here. Maybe we can take this exit and bypass the traffic. And we're all sort of politely co-piloting. We're all going to get there, much more safely and quickly and efficiently. And so I think you're right, groups will fight for the steering wheel. And in certain situations, there's no way everyone can own it. And there's certain parts of the buying journey and the selling process that are owned by various groups at various times. But what's most important is the handoff between the two and the 3, right? And the communication between them. Yeah. The single source of truth, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, it sort of gets back to a fight for relevance, right? Everybody wants to be seen as being relevant. And I think that sort of gets heightened as part of what we talked about early in the conversation about, automation that can assume, larger percent of the roles that perhaps some of these groups are doing, that these turf wars suddenly have higher stakes than before.
Yeah, and I think as an individual contributor, if they're listening to this podcast, it would be always, it's really tough. This is a statement I make a lot, where we have to not think inside out, like this is my process and I'm trying to drive the customer down my process because that's what I've been trained to do and that's what I'm measured to do and that's my productivity scores, et cetera, right? And it's really difficult to get a salesperson who's so driven by those productivity to flip for a second and say, hold on, what's best for my customer? Like if I really know my customer, it's not right for them to buy right now, me pushing them to buy may mean that they churn faster. So if I paused and said, you know what, let's give it a couple weeks, let this new person who's just joined get up to speed and let's revisit it, the customer will trust you so much more. So it's really hard for a seller to let go of that process and that control and trust the fact that if they do what's right by the customer, in the end, it will always work out. Whether they don't buy from them today, they may buy from them 6 months from now or the next year or your next job or their next job. They will always remember the sales reps that behave in that way, going back to the owning the behavior comment, right? It's tough for sellers because they're so measured, right? And there's there's so much productivity watching them on what they did all day and every day. They just have to learn how to trust the process and communicate with their managers in a way that explains what's going on in the customer's environment. And you just have to have enough in the pipeline all the time to make up for the fact that some may slip, but not trying to force them back in.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And it's not just trust in the process. They have to have trust in themselves. And this is a point that I've talked about with a lot of guests on the show is that part of, I think, the downside of some of our technologies we had is that we see sales reps just sort of feeling like it's more important to sort of conform themselves to the specific process and metrics rather than, as you said, do what's best for the customer. And as a result, I see when I work with teams, there's fewer people sort of doing what I did when I was younger in my sales career, saying, "Yeah, I'm gonna trust my instincts over the process." As I got more experience, because this is going to help the customer make the decision to buy from me. And yeah, it didn't always align with the process, but I earned that trust from my boss by being right and showing that, hey, we brought business in. And I don't see salespeople sort of taking that individual initiative quite as much. The top performers do, but there's that gap between the top performers that earn that right versus other ones that seem tentative to sort of try to reach out and grab it.
Yeah, and I think the answer for me is sales reps, individual contributors may actually want to do this. And I'm guessing that a lot would agree if they're listening to this would be like, yes, my God, that's what I deal with every day. And so the only way to fix this is we have to spend as much time with our sales managers, that middle layer, even if it's 2 or 3. So a sales lead, and then, a team lead, and then a couple of team lead manager, and then, as they're, that's sort of in between sort of a vice president or an SVP, EVP sort of, right? And an individual seller. Like the sales manager, in helping them trust the process as well, because many managers used to be sales reps. So they managed the way they were managed, not the way we now need to manage today, which is using the technology to do the things we used to have our weekly pipeline calls to talk about. Like, really, you're going to ask me those questions, yet I spent 2 hours doing all this data entry. Like, okay, can you get it out of the CRM system? You should know these things and spend the time with the sellers on coaching and mentoring and learning how to navigate some of the fact that we no longer as sellers own the process. We are helping our customers go through their journey. And so I think that there's a miss here on we spend time talking about big organizational sales, the individual contributor, the behavior, and we miss this spot around helping managers, especially those that have been promoted from individual sellers, to not manage the way they were managed and now to think differently. And I think if we can do that and empower those managers to then be able to manage both up and down, right? Coach and mentor the sellers, but then be able to very efficiently and effectively with all this new data they have, manage up, right? And share with their manager the fact that, we have some slippage, but I know what's going on. I feel comfortable and confident, now that we've got some of this these algorithms and machine learning, it's telling me that even with these swings, we know we're going to get it back because, we've got 6 quarters of data that lets me know that, all of those things to empower that sales manager to be far more successful, because they're stuck in the middle, right? Above them is saying, close the business. Below them is saying, this process doesn't work. And, they're sort of stuck in between.
Yeah. Help me. I need your help. And
I think sales managers are forgotten. We talk a lot about the rep. We talk a lot about, big sweeping changes and big trends. But we miss this opportunity to help the sales manager or even people who aspire to be managers.
Well, and I think that we also have to sort of break the chain, as you talked about, managers managing the way that they were managed when they were coming up. Because, and one example I'll give is, we put all this pressure, and we talked earlier in the show about the necessity, the requirement for individual contributors to, at all times, be engaged in continuous learning, to up their game, to learn the skills and the relationship skills and so on. They need to maintain relevance and the technology skills. And yet we expect that they do it all on their own time, because that's what we've always done, right? We never say to sales reps, this is really important. You need to develop these things. We're going to devote time during the day where we're going to invest in you to get better at these things. If we want somebody to read a book, we tell them to go home and read a book.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the management, right?
Yeah,
where you
absolutely.
say, listen, I need you to take an hour a day. Like, where I work, we've got something called Trailhead, which is a great learning tool that's offered both to our customers and our internal employees and non-customers about all kinds of topics: storytelling, diversity, hiring the right salespeople, like, how to open a sales call, how to, it could be anything. And we sort of gamify it, where you have some kind of way in which, people earn badges and things like that on our Trailhead. But, you can do things around gamification to get people to do things and invest time in activities that you feel will benefit them from just a pure personal perspective, but also from a manager's perspective, going back to making that time and investment. Maybe you take a class on communication skills. Maybe you take a class on, writing an effective email, because there's no tone in email, and you want to motivate people and make them feel, like you're in their corner. Or it might be understanding how to motivate people with different kinds of, personalities. I mean, really getting into the people side of it, right? When you're managing human beings. And so, I can only use myself as an example, as even when I was carrying a quota, I didn't have time during the week to sort of invest in those sort of continual learning. But I made time on my, if I was flying or driving, listening to back then it was a cassette tape or a CD or whatever it might be, and then going to podcasts and webinars where I actually would carve out 2 to 4 hours a week to actually focus on something. And so, you have to just make that time, especially if, as the, old adage says, if you and I were going to compete in chopping down a tree and we both had a axe and in 4 hours who could chop down more trees, and you were just chopping away and I would chop down 10 trees and then I'd sharpen my blade and chop down 10 trees and sharpen my blade, I would beat you. So, as a sales rep, you need to sharpen your blade, and just, even if it's 15 minutes, listen to something, listen to this podcast, something else, whatever it might be, you have to take the time, because if you don't invest in yourself, nobody else is going to.
Excellent. All right. Well, with that, we're going to end the show for today. Tiffani, thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was great conversation. Thanks.
It was, yeah. So tell folks how they can get in contact with you and learn more about what you do. Yeah,
so you can follow me on Twitter. It's Tiffani_Bova, and it's Tiffani with an I at the end. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I've got a Facebook page, and I write and blog a lot, so love to hear your feedback.
Excellent. Well, again, Tiffani, thank you very much. And friends, thank you for spending this time with us today. Make sure you come back again tomorrow for another great episode of Accelerate. So thanks for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.